Joining us now, former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What should Israel do?
Oh, Israel will have a compelling imperative to respond. No sovereign on earth would accept that attack by 200 ballistic missiles twice in several months without responding very forcefully. Probably there will be attacks on either a leading port or some kind of oil industry aspects, and probably, I cannot promise you because I'm not around the table of decision making right now, probably one of the elements of its nuclear military program, even if just to hint that that's an opportunity, America had to join us, and it's someone else's failure that we are finding ourselves alone.
I wonder if you can put yourself into the heads of the people who are currently making the decisions. My colleague Andrea Mitchell spoke to an Israeli leader who said they learned a lesson from the Americans. When your enemy is down, don't let them get back up. In that sense, do you expect that the retaliation from the current leaders in charge of Israel might go further in order to try to handicap not just the Houthis or the Hezbollah, but also Iran?
I can easily think of making this decision. I had been there, but I don't want to do this. It's not necessarily a clever thing to do. But I can tell you for sure there will be a very forceful response. If you want to have an example, think of Hudaydah in Yemen. It's about the same distance, some 1,300 miles, and the Israeli Air Force attacked there very forcefully, the main port and some other power plants. So there are no oil industry there. So we can do it, and it will be done. And
does it end there?
Excuse me?
Does it end there? Or is it going to be another retaliation and back and forth?
I'm not sure that it's very economic even for the Iranians to keep sending attacks of 200 missiles and ending up with not even a single person dead from this or any damage caused. In fact, you made a mistake. What intercepted them is not Iron Dome. It's Arrow and Super Arrow, and the interception happens over Jordan or neighboring country and out in space. But it's very extremely effective. We invest 30 years in this project, and the Americans and the British, to a certain extent, are helping us. We are thankful for that. Basically, what we see, Israel is very powerful. The last 2 weeks, from the pagers to the hitting of Nasrallah and the successful operation of the Air Force, so it regains for Israel is their self-confidence in their intelligence, in their Air Force, in their defense system, and create certain deterrence. It even helped Netanyahu to get some credit. After all, he's the prime minister right now. But having said that, Israel, however powerful, it's not omnipotent. And Netanyahu presented in his speech in the UN these two maps. One of the alliance of blessing, and then the alliance of whatever how we call it, chaos. So we need this alliance of us. We had to the best of my judgment, to accept 10 months ago the proposal of President Biden to establish this alliance, which enabled to put an end to the thing in Gaza and to bring back the hostages, to organize, to resupply the IDF, to deploy against this wider landscape, starting with Iran and all its proxies, the ring of fire around Israel, and fight it together.
Let me talk to you about that ring of fire. The Lebanese foreign minister came out after Benjamin Netanyahu made his speech at the UN, and he said this in response, and I'd like to get your opinion on it. We'll play it.
The Israeli Prime Minister came here today and said that Israel is surrounded by those who want to destroy it, an enemy. We're here, members of a Muslim Arab committee mandated by 57 Arab and Muslim countries. And I can tell you here, very unequivocally, all of us are willing to, right now, guarantee the security of Israel in the context of Israel ending the occupation and allowing for the emergence of a Palestinian state. He is creating that danger because he simply does not want the two-state solution. And if he does not want the two-state solution, can you ask Israeli officials what is their end game?
if he's right that the Arab countries around Israel do want stability, do want peace, all they're asking for is a Palestinian state, why would Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not take that?
Look, first of all, he's the foreign minister of Jordan, not of Lebanon.
I'm sorry, Jordan. I misspoke.
I listened very carefully to his speech. He deserves Israelis to listen to it. Of course, it's only half of the truth. The other part is not described for obvious reasons. It's not the right timing, so to speak, to raise the issue of Palestinian state.
Why not?
Because the whole collective, both our collective and the other collectives, are under a certain kind of trauma from the events. Recently, the Hamas and the Hezbollah are under trauma after 7th of October. Israeli public were in trauma. There is no readiness to contemplate it. Israelis are struck by a strong pain, by a deep frustration, by a sense of humiliation after 7th of October, calls for revenge. That's not the right time. No one will listen if you talk to Israelis now. But having said that, boiling blood is not a good recipe for statesmanship or leadership. So we have to hug our people, to calm them down, to show empathy and so, but leaders should always never lose sight of the end game. And one of the tragedies is that Netanyahu persistently from day one rejected all the need to discuss the day after. What will happen? What's the end game? There is an old Roman saying, if you don't know which port you want to reach, no wind will take you there. And there is a parallel even in Alice in Wonderland. That's part of our tragedy. Netanyahu, for reasons that has nothing to do with the interest of Israel, nothing to do with the national security, totally from some somewhat private consideration that has nothing to do with common good. He does not want to discuss what will be the next stage and how to put an end to it at a certain point. But nowadays, it's not the time to discuss it. Now it's time to win the war. We have a challenge. We expect the Americans to be with us. We expect other friends, neighboring countries. We need this alliance of the moderates in order to win. It's not the job of Israel to do it alone. It's not clever to expect Israel to complete it alone.
Point taken on the Israeli public. I know the sentiment is not behind a two-state solution right now, but also what the Jordanian foreign minister said, and he's, I know they're allies of Israel. They helped shoot down some of those missiles. What he was saying was that the Arab states around Israel can help guarantee the security. And I mean, that is a very intoxicating offer, Katie, if you don't want to continue war.
Katie, believe me, I spent most of my life fighting in uniform and spent most of my political life trying to drain the swamp, not just killing mosquitoes. And I tell you honestly, that's not the time. We shouldn't lose sight of it. Mm-hmm. But it's not the time to discuss it. It's now the time to focus on, first of all, to defeat the Iranians, to defeat the Hezbollah, to defeat the Houthis, to defeat the militia, to defeat the dormant cells in the West Bank, and so on. And it's enough job to be done. We need unity in Israel. I do not exclude the possibility that we will see calls to establish a unity government in Israel in order to make sure that there is a strategy and decisions are being made, not just fighting with no end. But that's time to fight, and the time will come to consider how to make peace.